Hello. Yesterday, I was at a conference with CIOs and CISOs, and looking around the room, I was one of the young guys. And today, when I look around the room, I'm actually one of the older guys, so thank you for that. I really appreciate that. But it's really great to have a photo captured of yourself because that sort of immortalizes you. And I'm old enough to look back at the start of my life when I was younger, and I'm also now old enough to recognize that this is probably as young as I'm going to look, so that's great. Today I'm going to speak to you about cybersecurity considerations for AI systems, and we've already heard a lot of really interesting topics and related, and a lot of what I'm going to say is really just reiterating that. But it is really important, and I'm going to give you a slightly different spin. Now I want to take you back to June 2007. Does anyone remember this day? Does anyone remember where they were? I'm from South Africa. If you're trying to place my accent and you're like, who's this crazy guy on stage? South African. I grew up there. For 30 years, I stayed in South Africa. I've now been 12 years in the Netherlands. So ek ben nu Nederlander geworden, ek denk. But on this day, I was extremely fortunate. I was in Chicago. And I was an auditor at the time in a multinational company and was very fortunate to be sent to the US for a week and a half on an audit. And it started with 3 days in New York, and at the end, 2 days in Chicago. So I was in Chicago, and I was walking down the Great Mile. Has anyone been to Chicago? Show of hands? Yes, we've got some of you. Excellent. So I was in Chicago, and typical big US city. Lights, tall buildings, messy streets, but lots of hustle and bustle. And I was walking with nothing in mind other than to explore the city. And I was going down the Golden Mile, they call it, where there's all these beautiful shops. And I saw a shop, which was very new to me, minimalist design. People were queuing outside. So as human as I am, I guess we all sheep in some ways, I joined the queue, because I was like, there must be something happening. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to join the queue. Eventually, I got into the store, and people were queuing around this table. And I'm a small guy, so I was kind of like trying to see what's happening out there, because I really wanted to have a look at this. And finally, I got to the front, and I got to the moment where I could see this thing. And this is what I saw. And I've got one. It's the original iPhone. And the reason I tell you this story is because this was a start of a revolution, a technological revolution. But if you had been there at that stage, on that day, as I was, and when I went up to it, it's tiny, right? And I was like, okay. Show of hands, at that time, who was Team Nokia? Team Nokia, a few. Who was Team BlackBerry? Okay, also a few. Who was Team something else? Okay, there were some, believe it or not. And who was Team No Mobile? Some people had no mobile phone. Okay. Today, show of hands, who's got a smartphone on them now, right now? Who doesn't? I'm curious if does anyone not have a smartphone on them? Okay, that's good. That's what I expected. But isn't that interesting? If you went back to 2007, there were still people not carrying a mobile phone around, and now fast forward to today, and everyone's got one. Who's got 2 mobile phones on them? 2. There we go. Interesting. And how many of you have more than 2 connected devices? So you have a watch that's connected to the internet via its own SIM. 3? Anyone? 3. We have people with 3. Good. I watched a really interesting YouTube video from like when cell phones were just coming out, and it was in Dutch, and they were interviewing people in the street on bicycles. Ja, mevrouw, wat denk je van mobiele telefoons? What do you think about mobile telephones, ma'am? And she was like, oh, this is ridiculous. I don't want people to be able to contact me wherever I am. And then they got another guy, meneer, wat denk je? Sir, what do you think about mobile phones? And he was like, this is silly. If people want to get hold of me, they can phone my house and leave a message on my answering machine. Do we remember those answering machines? What a wonderful piece of technology. But here we are. Now, the interesting thing is, if you look at today, how many revolutions, technology revolutions, are we also witnessing right now? And the question you have to ask yourself is, are you aware of them? When you look at Apple releasing spatial computing, does that sound like a scam? Does that sound like something that's just going to be a fad? Or do you think, wow, technology revolution? What about cryptocurrency? Scam? Revolution? Kind of interesting, right? Because you don't know, we don't know. And that's the interesting thing with technologies is there are sometimes dilemmas with technology. And the one I wanted to point you to is the Colling Ridge, and I always battle to say it because it's a mouthful, the Colling Ridge dilemma. But this is a gentleman which in 1980, he wrote The Social Control of Technology. So already in 1980, just after I was born, so I give you my age away there, he wrote this book and he came up with this dilemma. And it basically states that initially when a technology comes out, we're not actually sure what it's going to be used for. When the mobile phone came out, and when I looked at it in Chicago, I could never have guessed that we would have Uber, that we would have Airbnb, that we would have crypto wallets on our phones. And yet we do. And then the problem is that later on, once the technology starts getting used, starts getting embedded, it becomes extremely difficult to control it. So when you think of AI, which is why we're all here today, we're in exactly the same situation. This dilemma was observed in 1980, and here we are in 2023 with the exact same dilemma. We've got AI. And when it first came out, when ChatGPT came out, 100 million of us signed up, me. And over time, we started seeing what it could be used for. And now we're faced with the problem of, well, how do we regulate this? How do we control it? How do we make sure it's secure? How do we make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands? So this is really interesting because this dilemma is playing out now. And with advanced technologies, it becomes even more critical because to put advanced technologies back into the box, impossible. So something to think about, especially as you develop AI systems yourself. Now, with cybersecurity, there's a couple of risks to AI systems. And I think it's important just to frame that when you implement any technologies, you have to have cybersecurity, and preferably in the design, right up front. So as part of the functional design of the systems. And with AI systems being advanced technologies, of course, critical that you bring in all the AI and cybersecurity measures. But with AI specifically, there's some security risks that are unique to AI. And of course, I'm not going to have time to go through all of them. And luckily, the previous speakers have spoken about many of them. So I'll illustrate a few just to keep you excited. So data poisoning is one. And this is kind of an old adage, right? We remember database days, garbage in, garbage out. This is the same with AI systems, except it's even more pervasive. So large language models, we train them on the whole internet. The whole internet. It's incredible, isn't it? Except if you look at the internet, it's kind of not the most savory place. There's a lot of hatred online. There's a lot of bigotry. There's a lot of discrimination. There's different political persuasions, religions. You get the whole buffet of humanity. So is that the best data to train an AI system on? Not sure. But that's one of the issues that we need to face. And so it's no surprise that you're starting to see companies, and have already seen companies, developing their own models based on their own data. Because the old adage of data, garbage in, garbage out is even more important than ever before. So again, I encourage you, while you're developing your AI systems, to really be thoughtful about what kind of training data you're putting into it. Next is model theft, right? So this is you train this amazing model, and the next thing you know, it gets stolen. So the first one was Facebook with the Lambda model. That got stolen very quickly out of the gate. And you might think, well, what's the big deal? Who cares if a model gets stolen? Because isn't it available to everyone anyway? The thing is, though, when a company releases a model, generally they wait for people to use it, and then they start putting what's called guardrails in place. Start to limit the use so that you can't get the recipe for a bomb, for example, or a bioweapon, things like that. When models get stolen, there's no control. So a previous gentleman had asked, well, what kind of hacks are happening? Well, models that are not constrained get used for all sorts of things like phishing attacks. And so the sophistication of phishing attacks has gone up as a result. But more troubling, and yesterday I saw a beautiful article about a company that had developed a way for you to create an avatar of yourself, an avatar of your loved one, your ex who you still love but doesn't love you, They gave a lot of wonderful examples. And when I was reading this, and it's wonderful technology, by the way, so please don't get me wrong, but while I was reading it, the CEO had said, well, we've not really given consideration to what happens if someone misuses someone's identity. We've not really given consideration to how the information is going to be used. Essentially, they're going to wait for people to start using it to then determine how to fix these things. And I want to caution you there, because as an example, I could create an AI model of myself for my own purposes, and someone might steal it and use it then to pretend to be me. And you might say, well, big deal. But if you think about it, do you really want your identity stolen and then misused for fraud, for crime? Now, we already have, and I think a previous gentleman asked what kind of cybersecurity things are happening. Deep fakes is a reality for us. Just recently, in the UK, there was a politician who was being a victim of a smear attack from an audio recording, which showed him abusing his staff. And so there's an example of where AI systems can be used against us. And so model theft is not just language model theft, but it's also the theft of you as a person. And I really think this is something people need to think about. Also in the news, just yesterday, was 23andMe, the company doing DNA testing. They had a massive breach where they lost something like millions of records. So you think you get your DNA sampled, big deal, and now it gets stolen and it's out there. So we're moving into this world where the threats are becoming more and more significant. So be mindful of these things. And then finally, AI-powered cyber attacks, so that's deepfakes, which I briefly mentioned, and then phishing and malware. So hackers are already using the technology. It's a kind of arms race, right? They use the technology to improve the cyber attacks. The cyber community comes with controls and systems to protect against that. And that's been the industry for many years. So it's not really anything new. But with AI systems being as powerful as they are, that arms race is just getting more and more and more demanding. And so I expect that will be the trend for the coming years. It's an exciting time, of course, to be in cybersecurity and in AI and in technology. But I do want to say, as a few concluding remarks, that while you're developing fantastic technology, and please do so. I love technology. I'm an optimist, believe it or not. But as you do that, take into consideration all the negative ramifications of what your system can do. So yes, consider all the good stuff that it can do, but also look at the negative, because the reality is, once you put your system out there, it will be used for nefarious purposes. Guaranteed. And if you don't believe me, then release your technology and wait and see, and then call me at the end. That was just a very quick look at cybersecurity. It's a detailed topic. I've written a book on cybersecurity. If you'd like a copy, you can go to my website. It's also on Amazon, of course. In the event that you can't afford a copy, contact me on my website and I will, with greatest of pleasure, send you a digital copy. For me, cybersecurity is my livelihood, but I also want to encourage everyone to make sure that you have a fundamental understanding of cybersecurity so that you can implement it into your systems as you go along. And then, of course, when you write one book, you have to write another book, and which is fine, because my first book is Principles of Cybersecurity and the Basics, how to protect yourself, how to protect your company, and then a small chapter on how to protect the future. But my next book, in collaboration with someone else, because I've become a little bit lazier, is going to be about emerging technologies, not just AI, but also other emerging technologies like cryptocurrency, like robotics, like autonomous vehicles, and the cybersecurity implications of those. I'm also, if you are interested, there's an economist talk or an economist conference on space, the space economy, that's happening tomorrow and the day after. And it's one day in California, which I'm not going to be at, and then one day online virtual, which I'll be speaking at. So if you're interested in hearing about cybersecurity in space, then I would encourage you to sign up for that as well. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.
Arnaud, I think we do have time for any questions. Is there any questions for Arnaud at the moment? Yeah, we have one right there.
Yes, go ahead.
Just there.
Hi, thanks for the amazing presentation. My question revolves more around awareness.
Yes.
It's well established that cybersecurity professionals are low in number. AI professionals are low in number and the intersection is even lower. How are you tackling that problem where to keep up with the scale of emerging technology, we educate developers and people who are building applications to build securely from the beginning?
I feel like I should pay you for PR, but I wrote a book, is one. And this is mainly aimed at corporate leaders and boards, so people at the top of the organization. Your question is around developers. And as an organization, it's fundamental that you have training for your developers. So specific training that is targeted to the developer community and that looks at security for developers itself. There's, of course, the OWASP framework, which always has the top 10 type of cybersecurity breaches and hacks that are happening, and that's always a good place to start. And they themselves provide some training. So training, bottom line, is a necessity for anyone doing any kind of development work. Yeah. Anyone else?
Any others?
Hello, you should have come much more forward.
We just have the mic coming over to you now.
Yeah, I'm getting deaf, so I was like, what?
Yeah, I'm a cybersecurity professional too.
Yes.
But I was looking into password cracking, and so people are using ChatGPT to crack passwords. So basically, 8-character, complex.
Yeah.
Forget it. You need to be using at least like 14-character. I mean,
That's it.
crazy. It's like 5 seconds or something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's the point with technology, is it increases in sophistication and power. The previous speaker spoke, or I think the panel before spoke about quantum. And so as that hits us, then we'll have to improve our security controls. And indeed, passwords, some would say passwords are dead. I wish that were the case. However, I think being a fellow cybersecurity professional, we'll have careers for the rest of our lives. Because people are also inherently lazy. So yeah, you're right, passwords still an issue. And I do think with passwords, it's really more about our parents and the elderly, right? Where they didn't grow up with technology and they might not be aware, so they might not get it like we get it. I think the younger generation are a little more savvy, and I think everyone in this room probably understands it. But we also have a responsibility to educate our parents and our loved ones, because ultimately they are the ones getting disproportionately impacted by cyber attacks and scams. Yeah, but good point, yeah.
Aldo, thank you very much. I think we've
Thank
run out
you.
of time. I'm most certainly going to come and run out and get this book because I think
you so much.
it'll be very good.
Thanks a
Good
lot.
reading. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.